Going live now. There we go.
Okay. Okay, we are live. So welcome back, committee, and welcome back to Commissioner Fitzko of Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. And we've got today a proposal that I think you're bringing to us to look at to make a technical fix to statute. So if you want to just give us an overview, and then we've all got it, I think, on our screens, or can pull it up if we want to, if you want to walk through that, however you want to handle it.
Okay. So for the record, my name is Danielle Fitzko. I'm the interim commissioner for the Department of Forest Parks and Recreation. Thank you for letting me visit with you today and to bring to you, which I hope is a simple technical fix for your consideration. And it's in regards to the forest fire and prevention statutes. I figured I'd give you a little bit of background, and then we can look at the inclusion of some language that was omitted several years ago. So in Vermont, we have what we kind of call the forest fire warden statutes. And so each town has an appointed fire warden by the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation in partnership with the town. And one of the primary responsibilities of the town fire wardens is to issue burn permits, that open burning permits. I'm sure if you've all in the springtime of cleaning up around your yards if you have not, you've seen others have burn piles, piles of woody material that they burn. So fire wardens issue permits and they do that so that we can protect against forest fires. In Vermont, most forest fires are human caused. Natural cause would be like lightning. All of our forest fires last year were human caused, and 50% of those are like escaped from open burning. So the fire wardens play a key role. They monitor the weather, they talk to the applicants about what type of material they're going to be burning, and then they make determination to whether or not they want to issue the burn permit. Our staff at FPR monitor fire weather danger and provide a daily forecast from the fire season from March to November. And so the fire wardens use that information and look around locally to help make that determination of whether or not they want to issue a burn permit. We made some modernization to the statutes back in 2015, which was fantastic to be able to do that. Your committee helped us do that. But mistakenly, there was a clause in there that was omitted. And that clause was to allow the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation, with the approval of the Secretary of the agency, to actually issue a open permit ban because of the elevated fire risk. The reason we identified that it was missing was a couple of years ago, we had some pretty high fire danger. And we're like, okay, we need to get prepared to kind of stop and support the fire wardens and making that determination that it's really, you shouldn't be issuing burn permits at this point. And we realized that clause was gone. We rarely have to use it, but it's a safeguard that we have there in case the risk is that high, that we have that really helping fire wardens make that determination. And we don't have a lot of wildland fires in Vermont, which is great. We have, this system in place that helps us protect against that. Last year was a low year. We had about almost 100 acres that burned with 75 fires. Typically, it's about 200 acres with maybe 175 wildland fires. But that's, it's changing, recognizing the climate that we're in going forward. Massachusetts last year had over 1,000 fires. I don't know if you're familiar with the fire in Killington in 2021. There was 32 acres that burned. So we really just want to make sure that we are thinking forward and are prepared and able to respond to any sort of high risk. And so the request is to put the exact same clause that was mistakenly omitted in 2015 back into the fire warden statute. So we have that authority to support fire wardens.
Just a second, I'll get to questions. I'm wondering, since it was so long ago, in practice, have you been using the authority that isn't actually there?
We rarely use it. It's really just that safeguard because it takes some time to actually you got to get the approvals in place. So we have not used it, but the fire wardens still think it's there. And so they kind of know, they feel like they have that safeguard that will come in. So we haven't, it was just a couple of years ago that we figured it out, and then the pandemic, and we just didn't come with this technical fix because we had some other bigger issues, but we'd like to get this back in. So we have not used it.
And do I understand correctly that the individual town fire wardens on their own do have authority to?
Yes, they can do it on their own, and many of them do. And this is just to, sometimes they could be getting some pushback, or maybe some fire wardens may not be as active. This just allows us, because we're monitoring it daily with modeling, and what we actually do is every day at 6 a.m. during the fire season, we push out the fire weather forecast. So that helps them make their daily determination. So they can do it, and then we would like to have the authority to support them at a statewide level.
Representative Lipsky.
I'd like to sort of speak in support of this request, and it's not out of ignorance. I've been a carrier of literally hundreds of burn permits in my life. When you're involved with forest practices and land clearing in particular, it's a critical tool. The high risk that would require a ban is basically driven by two factors. One is drought, and the other is wind. And it's usually seasonal, and it's usually before the foliage, which foliage keeps moisture on the forest floor, thus reducing the chance of out of control or forest land fire. And then drought, which happens usually in August or September, when the lowest groundwater elevation occurs during those 2 months, and that also elevates the risk. But the local fire wardens do a great job, and you usually have to notify separately dispatch at the sheriff's department. So if someone reports smoke in Stowe Hollow or something, they know that's controlled and they have equipment there, whatever. So I think it's an important, given climate change, it's a very safe and appropriate addition. And the third point I want to make, whether you're a farmer, a logger, or a landowner in general, it's economically important to have the right to do this when it's safe. And not every state is as fortunate as Vermonters is to have this right. And this is a safeguard for the public, and that I think would be very reasonable.
Thank you for adding the extra clarity to it.
I've been living this, and it's a big responsibility when you turn.
Yeah. And so springtime, it is peak for us. That is the highest. And that's typically when we get out there and we clean up and want to burn. Last year, one of our earliest seasons, our first fire happened in March 22nd. So it's right when the leaves are not on the trees, you have less humidity, but the wind's blowing. So you have a dry layer, even though it's like mud season at the same time, it's high fire season. So people don't always think about that. And then there is summertime, and then it kicks up again in the fall when the leaves drop again. And our staff also train fire wardens. We have annual training. We give them, all the tools that they need and permits. So we're there to really help be their backbone.
Questions, Representative Rice.
Can you just speak to the data that you're looking at when you're making these calls, and whether there's an actual threshold that would trigger it, or whether it's more sort of just looking across a series of things and making a call?
We have two staff that have been trained with national modeling sets. So it takes everything in. We have actually 5 weather stations around the state. So we're getting local data and they put it into the modeling system that thinks about all the weather that's coming at us. And then we have, I think it may be 4 or 5 categories that we identify risk: low risk, medium risk, high risk, very high risk, and like extreme. So there's 5. So that helps us identify the forecast. So we wouldn't do it unless we were seeing extreme elevated risk for several days. And we knew like the forecast was telling us it would be like that for a while. And we don't do it by like town boundaries. Our modeling is based on like, ecological boundaries of how the actual weather forecast would naturally be, as opposed to like geographic, like political boundaries.
And is that the case when a town fire warden is making that call too? Is that?
We give them all the data.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to get on the listserv, it hits you at 6. I can guarantee every morning at 6 a.m. I know what that email is. I'm so appreciative of our staff because they take it so seriously. And it's real. I mean, they don't want to go out because they're trained to go out and we support towns in responding. So we do everything we can to help prevent.
I know.
Representative Templeman, if you can.
I'll defer to you.
Oh, no, mine's just really simple in support of what you've been talking about. My fire warden in Glendale, I don't think knows that this isn't back in the thing. So he will use this statute as a reason why he won't issue a burn permit, because we get people in Glendale, sometimes we can get a lot of pushback. And he's like, no, we can't because, and he lists out the reasons.
Yeah.
And he also lists that, he gets the thing at 6 o'clock in the morning and he says, no, I can't. And also it's so windy in Grand Isle. He's like, don't be, he's also doing a little fire education every time he denies a burn permit, which I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
So he's done a really good job. So thank you for supporting him.
My question is just a bit pedestrian. I wanted to get the language right for my notes. So it's the commissioner that we're seeking to give approval to?
Deputy
What was?
interim.
It'd be the Commissioner of Forest Parks and Recreation would make, has the authority with the approval of the Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources to actually put that ban on issuing permits. So I don't want to think it's a ban on all fires. It's on issuing permits, and permits are needed only in certain circumstances. So you don't need a permit to burn in a fire ring or your backyard, like, fireplace. It's really open burning, close to woodlands. Yeah. So it's specific category of open when you need actually a permit. So it's not a burn. It's not a ban on all fires. It's just open burning permits that requires that would be a ban on. And if we don't want to do it, it's preventative.
So next week we'll have Mike O'Grady will come in and we'll go through the language. We've got it here. It's like further down the document, but he'll walk through it with us, make sure that we understand any implications that we might be missing. Give us another chance to ask questions. And then I suppose if somebody sees that we're taking this up and wants to come in and ask us or testify for one reason or another, we'll give anybody an opportunity to do that too. I wondered if you wanted to speak to it. Interesting. The current remedy is to have the governor close the woods.
Yeah, that's also in the fire prevention statutes, and that's sort of like another elevation. And that is the governor has the authority to close the woods down if it's starting to really look like it's high risk. And then it's not just about fires. It closes the woods then, and hunters couldn't go in, and you couldn't have use. So that's really extreme. We want to have another layer below that where we can say, just don't issue burn permits right now. But the governor does have that authority in this statute to close the woods, and that means we're not accessing certain woods because of the risk.
Representative O'Brien.
My forest fire story, we were shivering when I was probably in 7th grade out in our field. It's just what you're saying, like that always strikes me as the most sort of tender moment of the year. And sparks from the sugaring rig went into the field and started a fire heading towards our barn. So I ran around and took all the sap, all these full buckets. I put the fire out and I had to.
Oh, no. That was expensive. Yeah, you sweetened it.
But my question is, when a town has a vacancy with the fire warden, how do property owners get burned?
Maybe, we really try and make sure that there's not a vacancy, but it can happen. In many towns, they have a deputy as well, just so they have a backup. So hopefully there's a deputy in place. It may also, the local fire department may fill that role to issue the permits. So hopefully there's a couple backstops that they can get a permit from. And in many cases, you know, if the fire warden may be a member of the fire department. In many cases, that's what it is.
Can you get a permit directly through FBR?
No, we do not issue local permits. I don't think so.
You don't run the one.
If I'm wrong on that, I will get back to you.
Representative Lipscomb.
In the language of the request for the policy, the word temporary doesn't appear, as in a temporary ban versus the authority to ban.
Excellent.
I'm just pointing that out. The ban may go on for 3 weeks, it may go on for 3 months, but it's still temporary, that you are taking in the science and the
Yeah,
conditions on the ground.
I think that adds a little clarity.
It's just a word worth looking at.
Yeah, good. So when we are walking through the language next week, bring that up.
And the other thing I want to point out that Vermont doesn't always operate alone. Often in New York State, Eastern New York, New Hampshire, and Southern Maine have had serious droughts in parts of those states. So they often issue, and then they say, well, you can't burn in New Hampshire, but you still can in Vermont. So I know there is communication. It's not just the political boundary of Vermont.
Yes, our lead on the fire program would have been here with me today because he could answer that question. But he's at what we call the compact meeting where the region gets together, even in Quebec, we all work together because if there's a response, one state's not going to be able to do it alone if it's a big fire. So we need to be able to coordinate and respond. So exactly. So they're there right now in training and working on how the response happens. So they do that a couple times a year.
Somebody over here for a question? See a hand? No, okay.
I was just curious, I'm from the West originally. We have a different
Oh, yeah.
profile of problems regarding forest management. In the West, the tree situation is such that you do get large, hot burns. I understand that the Vermont species of trees don't burn as hot, or
Yeah, we definitely are different here, but we do have forest fires, but we don't necessarily have the fires like you have out in the West that can go and go. And we do have deciduous species with leaves, the more coniferous species over out west. So our risk is lower. Some people say that we don't have much risk, but we have burned quite a bit in the past. So the potential is there, but will it be like the West? No, we're lucky about that. And Jed may even have some more information you can add on that.
If to that point, and Danny hit it, we have in most of Vermont the most diversified forest type in North America for its diversity of forest species on a per acre basis. Whereas Montana, Idaho, Arizona, they're often hundreds and hundreds of square miles of single species, often even age growth patterns with tinder beyond tinder. And once those species catch fire, there's no ecological breaks. That, as Danny pointed out, the deciduous trees tend not to ignite with resins. So we are fortunate in that regard. And I think our forest soils are more resilient because of the diversity of the plant communities in our region. So it's all interrelated. But what we have watched as Americans, the West endure in the last decade or more, including Colorado, is incredibly disturbing. And I did volunteer in another lifetime as a pilot for Wings of America. We did a lot of stuff all over the West. And then when I was flying out of Fort Apache in Arizona, we would be spotters for hot shot groups on a reservation. These are fire jumpers, and they'd get as many as 400 lightning strikes, and you'd be up in here and you'd see a bolt come down in the White River National Forest, and you fly and get on the radio, give them a latitude and a longitude, there's an explosion there. I interacted with and up in Lander, well, that was in Wyoming, but all in Idaho, everywhere. So I got a good window into that challenge in those ecosystems.
What was this term you used? Ecological break.
Well, within a given forest type, there might be an area that's got a lot of dead or dying red spruce or balsam fir, and that's a community within a forest. But then you go over a knoll or down into a ravine, and it's the forest composition is entirely different.
So that could stop the spread.
It could, and that's in the West, to try to create fire breaks. There are no natural ecological.
Manually do it, yeah.
So that's, I don't want to take your time. I'm just trying to share.
I would like to add that because of the intense Western fires and the federal government's heavily investing in response and prevention of those, and we are benefiting, particularly through the bilateral infrastructure law, where we are getting some funding in, which will allow us to hire on a new staff person. In particular, that person will work with communities to help build in fire response prevention and response plans into like the emergency response plan. So because there's big grant money out there, so we'll help them access those funds. And we do we encourage staff to get their red card so they can go fight Western fires, because that's what they will learn. So they can, if we ever have a need here, we want to make sure that we can have that expertise. So we support that. So if anyone wants to go, we'll help.
Red card, is that what they used to?
Call it a red card. Yeah, it actually kind of tells you your qualification. It's actually red, but you have to do a fitness test and certain level of training. And the more you're involved, the higher level you get. And so we want to have those levels available to us in the region. So
Representative O'Brien?
Once I was driving out in Oregon and the road was closed down because there was a fire, because they were they were doing a controlled burn on fescues, I think, raising seeds. So I was just wondering.
we do control burns.
Right, in agriculture and in forest economy, are fires used as tools, and then who has jurisdiction over them?
Yeah, so they are used as tools. I mean, we use them on state lands, mostly for wildlife habitat. That is better to have the burn as opposed to mowing. And so our fire leads would coordinate with our state land staff to do that. It's also a strategy with Green Mountain National Forestries. And then we train local fire departments to be able to do that as well if they have needs. So we provide annual training to local fire departments to do that safely, but it is a management tool that is used. But you got to have the right conditions, and sometimes it's limited, and you got to have a lot of trained staff on hand with the protective equipment so that everybody's safe. So it's not just something you should just go out and do. Yeah, but yeah, it's a tool. It's a management tool.
Representative Levitt?
I just had a quick question. Do we need to add language to this that says, is this ban going to be for the entire state or for specific regions? Because, like Grand Isle didn't have a drought when Southern Vermont did, or vice versa. So
we'd probably approach it based on where the need is. So it wouldn't necessarily be the ability to do it, but it would probably be like probably at that point, you'd want political boundaries to lift it up.
So that's I think a good question. And when we're looking at language, we can double check, but it would just we want to be sure you have the flexibility.
Yeah, great.
You can not just either say it's the entire state or a town, but.
Because it is very different.
Yeah.
I mean, the southern part certainly the fire was in southern Vermont last year, it was in March, but the Northeast Kingdom may not be kicking in until, May,
Yeah.
high fire.
Representative Rice?
Just to speak to both of those language pieces, the one that Jed brought up earlier in this, the language as written says that the commissioner may notify town fire warden, so it sounds like it's on a town by town basis. And then it says for a specified period of time.
Oh, it does, good, thank you. I haven't memorized it apparently.
So presumably our predecessors sat here and walked through the language carefully and arrived at a point where it answered all the conceivable questions and it was just left out.
And then we didn't realize it, so here we are.
But we may catch something that,
Yeah, always good for improvement.
yeah, Dave.
So back to my previous question about species and their burnability, and Jed, I include you in this one. So if I understand correctly, pre-colonial period Vermont had a larger number of conifers as opposed to deciduous trees. So if we were to do a wildlife restoration project to return to that model, we could be entering into a more fire dangerous period.
I think as we go forward, the way our changing climate is, we'll probably lose more of our coniferous species, recognizing that our southern species are marching up.
And those are more deciduous.
Yes,
I
yep.
see.
So, but we're seeing our fire season happen earlier each year, that's for sure. And we're having more droughts. And so that's all just adding to the risk factor. So we do burn. And that's why it's important for us to it may change. And I think we're not seeing it too much yet here in Vermont, but like Mass is. So what tells us that, who knows what it looks like 10, 20, 30 years from now?
Just, I don't want to act like the old grandfather who's trying to spread some knowledge. But because it's our realm in this committee, and forest ecology is fascinating to me. I'm no scholar, but there are species like ponderosa pine that they drop cones and they lay on the forest floor, but they don't become fertile. There's so much resin until heat, which comes from forest fires, pops.
Dependent on the
Yes.
fire.
They are to reproduce as a woody species, they need a fire to occur.
It's red.
And that just fascinates the heck out of me.
Yeah.
A lot of the West is like that.
I'd be more than happy to recommend or bring somebody in on my team or others to give you any kind of Forest 101. Remember, my roots are in urban, so I can walk you around Montpelier and tell you every tree. But I'd be happy to, if you're interested in even the conversation about agriculture and carbon and mitigation strategies, I'd be happy to do that for forestry as well.
We'll confer, we're next week, I think we're hoping to start hearing some more folks, foresters and people in the forest products industry.
Great.
We want to cover all bases and I'm sure there's folks right in the department. Yeah.
And you're aware of, I told you about our plan that we're working on right now, our Forest Future Strategic
Yes.
Roadmap.
Yeah, that's on the list.
And next Tuesday, we have a stakeholder meeting. We're bringing everybody together to kind of identify what is our desired future, which we have some identified 22 key drivers for the future. So it's a really good process. And so hopefully you can engage at some point too.
Representative O'Brien?
You were talking about political boundaries. There's not a county fire warden, is there, or do your county foresters somewhat have that role?
We have 5 district forest health staff that serve in a fire capacity as well. So they would support the local fire wardens in those 5 regions. And so they work with them all the time. Yeah.
Are they located in the regions or are they?
Located in the regions, yep. Springfield, Rutland, Essex, St. Johnsbury, and Barry. And then we have a fire lead.
Ah.
So it helps coordinate. And then we'll bring on another person that will do the community grants. And we're trying to elevate our training so we can get local towns trained up more.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if there are any other questions. I think we've got a pretty good handle on the background and we'll go through the language in a little more detail next week. And it'll be, I think we do that on Tuesday, unless there are any, hangups, we can probably make this our first bill. And we talked about the timing and, it wasn't critical that we address it maybe immediately, but we also don't want to wait till fire season starts up in the middle of March. So we'll get it to the Senate and then hopefully they can, move the process along.
Thank you so much. It was great to visit
Good to
with
see
you.
you again.
Thank you.
Happy Friday.
Have a good weekend.
Thanks, you too.
Son and
Good, all right, well, we are not done for the day. We will have another session at 1 o'clock. Come back then and we'll wrap up for the week.
awesome.
We won't be here till 4. So